Welcome to the Online Prosperity Show, the number one place to discover the people, ideas, and strategies helping professionals, business owners, and leaders to solve real world problems and grow with clarity and confidence. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga. And if you've ever maybe frozen in a meeting, stumbled in an interview, or felt the pressure of a difficult question where even the wrong answer could actually maybe cost you a deal, your reputation, or your confidence, then today is the episode for you, because we're going to be talking about how to answer tough questions with clarity, confidence, and authority, and how, if you master this one skill, it can transform your career, your business, and even your personal relationships. And if you enjoy conversations like this, remember to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching this on, so you never miss an episode. Now, today, I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming back to the show Michael Dodd. Now, Michael, welcome back. How have you been, my friend?
Really good, thanks, Prosper. Really good indeed. But it's great to be back on the Online Prosperity Show again.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. I heard you were coming back to Australia, and I was like, maybe I might not have a chance to see you. So why don't we get you on the show? And at least that will be my version of, keeping tabs with the good old Mike. So what's been happening? What has been happening since we last spoke?
Well, I am doing the Michael Dodd Professional Speaking Tour of Australia, which runs from early March to the end of April. And so it's great to be coming back to Australia, where I started working for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation before they made me a foreign correspondent and sent me over here in the Northern Hemisphere. And so since I stopped being a foreign correspondent, I've actually thought, well, my mission in life is to help people give great answers to the tough questions that Australian journalists and others are likely to ask them during the course of their career. If they're on TV, they might be getting what we call blowtorch-on-the-belly questions, which can be really tough and really nasty, but of course asked in the spirit of getting the right answers for the audience, of course. And some people are able to answer those really well, but a lot of people struggle. And my mission is to help them to give great answers to tough questions wherever they are in the world. So I have done 6 continents so far, but I thought, given that most of my work tends to be in the Northern Hemisphere, it's time I came back for a visit to Australia to help my fellow countrymen give great answers to tough questions, even for those who one day may come on the Online Prosperity Show and face tough questions from Prosper, which is a whole new genre.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, welcome back. I mean, it's going to be, exciting to hear about your travels, your experiences, especially the 6 continents and whatever it is that you've been up to. But the last time we spoke, we covered the part that you actually sang solo in the Sydney Opera House at some point in your career. Is that happening again on this tour?
Unfortunately not. That really was for one night only experience there. I was at high school. My voice hadn't broken. And I was in a sequence of shows, a sequence of songs, which we put on behalf of our school, Manly Boys High School, now under a different name on the northern beaches of Sydney. And we put on, for a charity fundraising event, we did a sequence where we came along and had to sing songs. And the kid who was singing my bit, as it turned out to be, his voice started to break, and so he had to sing in a falsetto voice, and it was a bit wonky. And so the producer of this grand production in not just any part of the Opera House, but in the concert hall of the Opera House, the big one, he said, Michael, you've got to do it. And so that was a great experience at a very young age, but no one has ever invited me back to the Opera House. I did go back there once to cover the opening of the election campaign of Bob Hawke in, I think it was the 1984 campaign. But I haven't been invited back to sing, so there's probably a lesson in that. But I am coming back to speak, whether the Opera House like it or not. So I'll be coming back and starting in Cairns and working my way around the East Coast, Sydney, Melbourne, HostProsper. Maybe I will see you there, and Adelaide. And so I'm working there with business leaders groups. These are typically chief executives who gather together to hear speakers to help them improve on various aspects of their performance. And so I'm working with a number of those in Melbourne and Adelaide, which is a great opportunity. And I'm also going to be available for anyone else in the business world who wants me to come into their company and hire me to work with their sales team or their top team or their young people's team when it comes to giving great answers to tough questions, which is really important in business, as you know.
Oh, absolutely. And especially these days where the public seems to have a say immediately on social media or just whenever something happens, you know what I mean? I feel like people actually need to be, sort of prepared for when those sort of questions come about. But take us back to the beginning. Why?
Very true.
Yeah,
we're in a changing world, and often, like with the chief executive, they may not be thinking about it. They might perhaps end up talking to a few people at the cafeteria at lunchtime, and if they're saying something that's significant, it can be put out there on social media and become big news sometimes in a way that they weren't thinking about. So the way the internet works, it has transformed the world. And when it comes to giving great answers to tough questions, it's now more important than ever, because an answer will go out there and it's on the internet and it stays there forever. And so if you're giving bad answers, like someone who used to be called in this country where I am now in London, a guy who used to be called Prince Andrew, we now have to call him Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, because he's sort of been defrocked, I think, as they might say in the Church of England. And he gave an interview. Admittedly, it wasn't a chat in the cafeteria. It was on the BBC's Newsnight program, a very serious current affairs program. And he gave some horrendous answers, which some of which have proved to be false over time, giving false information. But that interview is still there and still watched on the internet and is there to embarrass him every day. I mean, a lot of people would say, given the various sins he's committed, that serves him right. But this can happen to people who haven't done things wrong like him, and that they can just perhaps be having an off day or not have thought through what they're going to say when they're in the spotlight. And they're the kind of people who often need help, a little bit of help, with their great answers. It might be the content of what they say, it may be the way they structure it, or it may be the way they look and feel and sound when they're actually delivering those answers. And they're all important, and that's my way of helping the world, to get them to, I want them to be absolutely truthful in what they say, but you can give a truthful answer which is horrendous, or you can give a truthful answer that is brilliant. And I'm trying to get them to give truthful answers that are simultaneously brilliant.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that, because, I always joke around when we start, recording and say, just from now on, now that we're recording, be careful, because whatever you're going to say can and will be used against you on TikTok, and obviously it is a joke, but that's just now the lay of the land. But let's just talk maybe about the psychology behind tough questions. Why do intelligent, capable professionals, people that lead companies, are, at the top of their game, often freeze under pressure?
That is true. And someone can be very good at making business decisions, but not so good at being persuasive and telling people about them. And that's where a lot of people kind of need help quite often. They might be, whatever their profession is, they might be very good at the basics and fundamentals of that profession, and they may be quite brilliant in some ways. But when they're there facing pressure, possibly on the media, but quite possibly in an inquiry, a public inquiry, or in a tough conversation with one or a bunch of clients, they may not be so good at actually getting across their expertise in a way that's helpful for the audience. And sessions on Great Answers to Tough Questions typically focus on who is the audience. And if they're a TV audience, that's one group of people, or if it's people who might potentially buy your product and need your product, that's another different group of people. And I'm always trying to get them at the very start to focus on the audience, because one person might be asking the question, but the answer may well be conveyed in all kinds of ways through the internet to lots of other people. And so they need to be thinking not just to the person who's asking the question, are they a nice person or a horrible person? They need to remember that what they say to that person in an important situation is really important and will be passed on to others. And so it's not just the person who's actually opened their mouth saying, what's the situation about this this thing that you're talking about. It's a matter of thinking, who's the audience beyond the people in the room at the moment who are going to be told about what the answer is. And, in this day of mobile phones, people can get recorded sometimes when they're not expecting it. And, the ethics of that is questionable, but, the content of what they say when it gets put out there on social media can be really important. And so if you're giving great answers to tough questions whenever you come across them in every aspect of your life, then you're in a much better position when something you say gets put out there.
You see, just listening to you talk, there's an air of class and being polished in the way you phrase your words and sentences and things like that. Now,
on a good day.
Some people actually believe communication training is just about sounding polished. Would that be a misconception?
Absolutely, yeah. It's about the content you say and the way you structure it, as well as being how you're coming across when you're actually getting that information out there. And so there's a lot more to it than often meets the eye. And so typically when I'm running a training session in a company, I'm typically asking the questions. They might be the sort of sales objection questions that they're getting. And if they're on the sales team, they need to be really good at giving convincing, very persuasive answers to those kinds of questions, whether it's, why does your product, even though it's good, cost so much? Or isn't it, wouldn't I be better off to buy the product from one of your competitors, which is doing it slightly differently? And so people need to be ready for that. And so in a training session, often I work with a videographer, and the videographer records it and we play it back. and they can see themselves. So if they're shaking under pressure, or if they're stopping and halting a lot along the way under the pressure, kind of wilting, that shows up, and always looks worse on the TV screen when you play it back. But that's all part of the process of getting them into top shape, so that when they're out there doing it for real, they're well planned and practiced, and they can make it look a lot easier than they found it the first time.
And we now live in a world where people bang on about storytelling and how do, you did mention the content, right? And also the context of what it is that we're talking about and things of that nature. Is that also part of what you're teaching them, or are you just helping them, obviously appear and sound and also answer questions in a way that, the other person on the other end can understand and articulate for their audience?
Yes, as you've kind of suggested in the way you asked the question, there is more to it than that. And one of the things that's really important that people often don't realize is that if you're there selling your product on behalf of the company, and whatever question or questions you're asked, what's really important is not just giving the right answers, the right factual answers to those questions, though of course that is important. What's more important in some ways is getting across the right message on behalf of your company. So the message might be, with this newfangled device, when it's used properly by your people in your company, it will save you a lot of money and make your clients a lot happier. So that's the message. So while you're there, perhaps being confronted with all these questions where you've gone to their company and you've explained the proposition, your main purpose is to be getting across the right message. And you mentioned storytelling, and stories, if you can think of them not as fairy tales, but think of the stories as real life examples. And typically, to get across a message, which might be this product will save you money and make your customers really happy, you want to have a real life story that backs that up. Because it's all very well to make the assertion, this product is really good, but you basically need to show, not just tell them that it's good. And that's where the story element really comes in. So a good salesperson will have an armory of a whole bunch of real life examples where people have interacted with a company's product, and they will be able to show how it made a difference to their life, to their business, or whatever it is. And so telling real life examples to back up the messages you're trying to get across is supremely important. And a lot of people don't realize that, but when they've done it in a training session, then they realize, yes, I can see how I can potentially be far more effective as a salesperson and far more persuasive by getting across the right message and backing it up with the right set of real life stories that have happened and that paint a picture in people's minds so that the audience can actually see what you mean, because they can picture this story that you're telling, that, before your product came along for person X, it was really bad. And now person X is really happy and really doing well because your product, made things better for him. So real life examples are supremely important. And often when you're in a training session, it's a matter of training people to pick the right examples and to tell them in the right way, which often touches a bit on emotion. It's not just a matter of giving them the facts. A really good message typically has a factual element, because it's true, but it's also got an emotional element as well. And so you're training people often to be able to do those two things, touch people intellectually by giving them the facts, but touch them emotionally by telling them a story which touches the heart and is far more persuasive than a whole bunch of dry and dusty facts.
Now, Michael, you see, in the world we live in now, we live in a world where we're mobile first. Like you were saying, you could say something at a cafeteria and it ends up on the 9 o'clock news or something of that nature. And be the case, right? There's also the other side of communication where people like myself, I'm communicating right now and also representing a brand and also representing, the business that I'm building and things of that nature. So as a, executive, you might start a podcast and actually start, interviewing people and asking questions. Now, I wanted to ask, on the other side of the coin, is there any sort of way that you also help people on the other side, because you've done this for all your life? You've interviewed people like Lech Walesa from the former president of Poland, and when you come across people with that sort of elevation in life or station in life, you might actually be starstruck. So what do you have for people that are also asking questions on the other side?
Well, sometimes people need help with the questions. Typically, you're doing pretty well, Prosper. Well done. But often people who are in the mode of asking questions do a really bad job. I mean, if you go to a public meeting, a public event where someone's on stage and that may be a politician or it may be some sort of celebrity, and then they say, well, now we're going to ask the audience to come up with your own questions. Now, some of them may be brilliant, but quite often, and I've been to public events like this in Australia and in the United Kingdom and other countries as well, often the questions are really poor. And so I do find myself sometimes working with companies, helping them to ask better questions. There was one I remember, I was working for a company, I won't be too specific, but it was more like an authority, a public authority. And they had to send people out to do inspections of premises. I don't want to be too morbid here, but sometimes there were body parts and things in the premises, quite legitimately. They weren't working for murderers, but they had to question people about their laboratories and how clean they were. And I remember in the briefing call, they were saying, look, we've got this team of inspectors, they know their stuff, but they don't really come back with the right information very well because they're not asking their questions very well. And we tried it out, and sure enough, as is a very common mistake, people think to ask a question, sometimes you have to make a great sweeping, long-winded statement first. And sometimes they don't even get to the question. When these public meetings are often, they ask for questions and people go out and say, I think you're stupid. That's not a question. And in a lot of ways, people often don't realize that it's a very distinctive role when you're in a question asking mode, like an inspector of a laboratory. And that's very different from having to answer questions, to like be head of the laboratory and be giving great answers to questions from the inspector. They're quite different modes. And so I can help people ask the questions and help them to answer them, which is often what you get in training sessions. I might be going there to tell them how to answer it, but sometimes they need help with asking them as well.
Absolutely. I think there's a computer language that they call garbage in, garbage out, GIGO. If you ask the wrong questions, obviously you will not get the right context of what it is that you're trying to get at. And you're looking at your story and your experience now. You've spent years asking those tough questions, to some of the biggest people in the world. And now you're spending your time helping people answer them. It's almost like your past training, and career was actually setting you up for the purpose that you now have. Did you ever realize that this could be who you would be in the end?
No, probably not. No, but I must say I owe a big debt of thanks to the certain people at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation who, when I was new in the organisation, spent a lot of time with me and my fellow young incoming trainees, really drilling us on asking questions. And they'd be very critical. We do a lot of practice interviews with people in the office who are pretending to be politicians quite often, or pretending to be business people. And we do these practice interviews and they'd be recorded and played back. And they'd be saying, oh, don't say that, say it like this, don't do that, don't do that. It was quite tough, but it was really valuable. So they would be saying, only ask questions in an interview. If you're an interviewer on the ABC, we don't want you making statements. You know, if you're interviewing the Prime Minister, it's not your job as the interviewer to say, Prime Minister, you're doing a really bad job, aren't you? That's not your job. I mean, you could be asking him how you feel, Prime Minister, about people who criticise the way you're doing this or doing that. That's perfectly fine. But it's not your job there to be giving your personal opinions. And we were rigorously and ruthlessly trained to make sure that we didn't do that. And that is applicable not just in the world of interviewing politicians. So if I go back to the people I was training to ask better questions in the laboratories that they were inspecting, what they were getting into trouble for from me was, look, you're making a statement before you're asking a question. Don't go in there and say, look, this laboratory is a bit messy. There's a bunch of dead insects over there. That's making comment. You should be going in just asking open-ended questions. You know, how happy are you with the standards of hygiene in this laboratory? Are they good enough? And then you might say, well, what are you going to do about all these dead insects everywhere? But that's a question. It's not a comment. And often it's a matter of teaching people, when you're teaching them how to ask questions, it's how to basically come across as objective when they're asking them. They might have opinions, and they can use those opinions to phrase the questions, but don't express the opinion, because that gets in the way. You said garbage in, garbage out. If you're going there into the laboratory and you're expressing your opinion about the standards in the laboratory, then the person is not so much giving you objective information. They're going to be reacting to your claims that you're making. And that's a very different thing from asking the right questions to actually get a scientifically valid bunch of answers that can stand up to scientific scrutiny and be far more useful to the people who are employing you.
And usually when somebody is responding to a statement, they usually are defensive, or they're trying to either support that, and it sort of like deviates a little bit from the truth. But if you're looking at that as a reference point, as in stop making statements and, just not expressing your opinion, does that fly with all cultures? Considering you've sort of spoken in 6 different continents, is this a uniform thing across all cultures, or would there be any differences in communication in other cultures as well, based on what you've mentioned?
Yeah, every place does have its own kind of culture. One of the fascinating jobs I had was working for an arm of the British administration here, where it was a matter of going around and training people in different parts of the world who were working in British embassies and consulates. And I won't say too much about that, but one of the things was that in each country we went to, they were very wise, because I'd be going along to train their people to give better answers on behalf of the embassy or the consulate or of the whole of the United Kingdom sometimes. But we would have they'd invite in a journalist who would be talking about what it's like in this particular part of the world for people dealing with journalists. For example, one of the really interesting ones, they brought in a journalist in. We went to Russia, and they brought in a journalist who was he was actually a New Zealander, but he'd been working there, and he said, "Well, the way things work in this country, people who are working on some kind of newspapers and magazines often expect to be bribed. That you've got to bribe them to print something about your company, and so you need to be aware of that." So it was a very different sort of culture. I mean, that would be seen as a terrible thing in Australia and in Britain and in America, by and large, to be bribing journalists. And certainly he was not recommending bribing journalists. He was personally against it. But he said, you need to know that the culture here is different, or the way things work here is different. And that was a light bulb moment for me. And I thought, oh yeah, that's it really underlines the point you're making, that everywhere can be different. The fundamentals that I talk about in terms of giving great answers to questions or asking great questions, the fundamentals do tend to work in every country, but you've sometimes got to be aware of cultural things. For example, in this country, there's a lot of different counties, and they're not all the same. People in Yorkshire are known for being quite direct in the way they say things. They're not happy about something, they're very quick to let you know. They can do it politely, but they're often quite direct in how they say things. Now, that's a characteristic of Yorkshire people, who are quite charming in their own way, but that's quite different from what you would typically get if you were in Surrey, which is an affluent part of just outside and inside the fringes of London. And people there would be sort of more traditionally, typically, frightfully British and frightfully polite. And so they wouldn't be as direct as the people in Yorkshire. So, yeah, everywhere is a bit different. And it's often helpful in terms of being prepared to know about that before you start, making speeches or going there on behalf of your company. It's often good to get the feel of the place where you're going to be doing business, so that you're understanding the cultural norms for that place. And then you can use the kind of principles I teach and the kind of methodology I teach for answering questions and for asking them, but adapted to local conditions, so that you're in touch with people and you can empathize with them and connect with them so much better if you understand their world.
Absolutely, because you can't, fish don't see the water that they swim in, and if you can't sort of be in their space, then they don't see eye to eye with whatever it is that you're trying to say to them. Now, you're about to begin your 2026 Australian speaking tour, and we just caught you before you jumped to the airport. Now, what are business leaders most worried about right now, when it comes to speaking and answering questions that, they should be on the lookout for on your tour?
I think one of the things which is pretty much universal is something called VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, VUCA. And the reason that VUCA comes up a lot is because we are in a time of accelerating change. Change is moving really quickly. And so from a business perspective, business is kind of like certainty. Basically, it's a lot easier to sell products and services in a time of stability, when people are assured about their income and they're feeling comfortable, and that things aren't going to change too much. But in the world we're in, there's a massive amount of this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity everywhere. And I think we're in a period of what I call VUCA plus, because for the past year, we've had Donald Trump as president of America in a way that we've never had a president quite like him before. And he is amazingly changeable, amazingly volatile, and so he's kind of shaken up the world in ways sometimes that he wanted to, and in ways that he perhaps didn't. But it's a really uncertain world as a result of that. And so one of the things about businesses everywhere is they're having to deal with this super acceleration of change and the fact that things are so different each day. I mean, people wake up, and I'm a long way from Washington here in London, but people wake up every morning here and they think, turn on the radio and find out, what the hell has Donald Trump done today? What on earth is he thinking about? It was the start of the year and he invaded Venezuela and captured the Venezuelan president, is putting him on trial in New York. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing to happen, and it doesn't bode well for overall certainty around the world. And so the people who are running businesses and have to speak on behalf of their businesses are coming into speaking in an environment where things are changing so much. And so I'm very aware of that, and they're very aware of it. And so it does have an impact on the way they need to often improve their verbal skills and be ready for any situation in a way that maybe 30 or 40 years ago, it wasn't quite so important because the world wasn't changing nearly so fast.
I can concur with that, because every time we wake up in Australia, it's a whole different news cycle. You know what I mean? Whatever was breaking news yesterday is already old news by the time we get up here. And I don't think AI is even helping the situation as well, where we could have an expert say something and people can actually put a voice over that is AI generated with that person saying completely different things. Now, how can experts be sort of prepared for this kind of world that we're living in, especially when it comes to, they could say the right thing, but somebody somewhere can just be sitting on their computer and then dub them over saying things that they never actually say.
Well, it's a bit hard to control. Some things, I suppose, are out of your control. But in a world where there is so much changeability and truth is coming under attack in a way from sort of high up people in various parts of the world, one of whom I've mentioned, but there's others. And so one of the fundamentals, I think, in terms of operating in this world of much change is to be really important that everything you say is an exact truth, particularly when you're in the public spotlight. And so, if someone took what I was saying to you and they changed it massively, and then they played it to people who are your audience, hopefully, if they're used to me telling truths to you, then they're going to say, well, that doesn't sound like what Michael Dodd would normally say. I think I should be suspicious of this. And so they should be. So the more you and your company have got a reputation for truth-telling, the more audiences are going to be skeptical of things where, if AI is being used for dastardly purposes, which are, of course, totally unethical in the way you describe them, if that's going to happen more and more, which it seems is quite possible, if you can have a reputation for yourself and your company for being a truth teller, then you are safeguarded to a certain extent from that, because people will know you, and so they'll feel as though they know you even if they never met you, because they've seen you on TV talking, and so they'll be rightfully suspicious of something which is AI distorted. I mean, when you talk about all the things you hear out there, I mean, I think there's a certain degree of very healthy skepticism on behalf of people who interact with the internet, which is a lot of people, that you can't necessarily believe everything you see on face value. I mean, if I was trying to say, well, Prosper, I saw this on the internet, so it must be true. As a man of the world, you'd probably be a touch skeptical. And so I think, truth is becoming, in some ways, it's always been really important, but it's particularly important in this environment because you want to have a reputation as a truth teller so that people will be skeptical if they ever hear anything where dastardly AI usage has distorted the truth. And hopefully, in most cases, they'll spot it, and then you'll be safe.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for that. Now, for those that are watching, as you can gather, Michael works with business leaders, executives, and professionals who are brilliant at what they do, but they still feel nervous about media interviews, presentations, job interviews, and just difficult conversations with clients or stakeholders. Now, Mike, if somebody resonates with what you're talking about right now, and maybe they want to catch you while you're on tour or anytime later, where can they go on the internet to get in touch with you?
Well, there is a website, which is www.michaeldoddcommunications.com. So there's a lot about what I do there, but people can always send me an email, and the email address is very similar to that, michael@michaeldoddcommunications.com, and send me an email. I mean, that's often how I work here. Is I work with business groups and bunches of business leaders, and I get to meet them on the day when I'm interacting with them. But sometimes people who weren't there but have heard about what I've been saying send me an email. Please come into our company. We need to talk about improving the answers that our sales team are giving. Can you help us? And the answer is usually yes. So from early March to late April, I'll be around making my way around Australia. So if people send me an email before I leave, we can enter into discussions, and maybe I can come along and help them and their team, which would be a joy. It's nice to be giving something back. The ABC helped me to communicate better, and I help other people to communicate better. And it's great going into companies and getting that opportunity to help their people who haven't had the same kind of training that I've been privileged to have, to help them to give better answers or ask better questions. And that's always a joy when you end the day and people are a lot better at the end of the day than they were at the start. And the really good thing about communications training is that it is confidence enhancing. While I'm not typically teaching too much directly about confidence, if you've actually got the content of what you say, whether it's in a presentation or in a media interview, or when you're being questioned by people, if you've got the content right and you've got some great messages in line with that content and some great real life stories to tell, real life examples to back up those messages, then you've got every reason to actually feel more confident when you're there talking to people, because you think, well, I know this worked at the last place when I had an audience, it'll work here. And so it's nice to have that confidence enhancing effect on people, even though you're not teaching them directly to be more confident. By what they're doing better gives them that added confidence, which is really always good to see.
From what you're saying, I'm actually just hearing that confidence is not talent, it's actually preparation, and when you're well prepared, you literally can ace whatever interview that's in front of you. I can't wait to see what people are going to do.
Well, one of the enemies I'm basically coming up against is people say, a minority of people who don't understand it say, just wing it, just say whatever pops into your head at the time. And typically, if you see someone on television who's performing very well, whether they're a business person or a politician or someone else, if they're performing well, they've probably given it some thought beforehand. So what they're doing is actually putting into action at that key moment what they've thought about before. So they've planned. they've prepared and they may have even practiced. And in the training sessions, we are planning, preparing, and practicing. And that does, by improving the content of what's coming out of their mouth, makes them feel so much more confident about it. They're typically, at the end of the day, they're often feeling, oh, I can't wait to get some really tough questions because I know how to answer them. And that's because, in the session, we've been practicing, preparing, playing back, scrutinizing, improving along the way. And that is a great process and really helps. But, to make that point about if you go along and see a play, Melbourne is, of course, one of those great cultural centres of Australia. You probably know that, Prosper, as you live amongst it. And, I've seen great theatrical productions in Melbourne. And if it's a typical one where they have to, learn their lines beforehand, not a sort of improv kind of thing, then, you might see them even on opening night. And you think, wow, that actress and that actor were really good. And it was only opening night. You might have thought they'd be really nervous on opening night. But what have they been doing for probably 2 or 3 months before that? They've been on stage rehearsing. And while they sound spontaneous, as if it's just popped into their head, really, they're confident at delivering what they've got to say so much because they've been there planning, preparing, and practicing. And it's the same with a lot of answers. There's a lot of questions are not a surprise. If you've got a bucket full of new things which the sales team are selling, then, a good salesperson will get to know the products really well and will be talking to customers who've been using them. And so if you're working with them about getting the best of all those experiences of working with a product and working with the customers, then they're in a really good position to make a really good pitch and make it, with good content, good structure, and good delivery style. And when you're working on them with that, and then ta-da, they go into the workforce then after a whole lot of extra practice, then they're so much better. And that's not only good for them and good for their company, it's actually good for the receiving end people, the people who are asking them the questions, maybe buying, maybe deciding not to. But if they're on the end of a good communication performance, it's better for everybody.
No, Michael, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. I mean, your life story and your experience just really tells us that the ability to answer tough questions calmly is often what really separates trusted leaders from overlooked experts, because some people actually make their career from a TV interview or a podcast interview, whereas other people actually drive their career to the ground. And it's just that capability that you're bringing to the people and things of that nature. So thank you so much for sharing this, and I can't wait to see you in person when you come around to Australia.
I really look forward to it. And one of the things I'll be telling Bevan, I'll be telling you, but you probably know it already, Prosper, is that often people think, oh, that person's good at communicating, they were just born that way. But often they've actually learned some things. And so improving your communication is a learnable skill. It's something that people can learn, and you can learn in a session where you're actually learning it while doing it. And that's something which, makes people really keen to learn and then keen to go out in the wider world and put into practice. So, well, I look forward to telling you more, maybe over a very mild lemonade with maybe just a touch of beer in it or something. What is the beer they drink in Melbourne? Let me think. There's something called VB, isn't it? Victoria Bitter. Yeah. Maybe over one of those with just a touch of lemonade, we can have a further chat about this, Prosper.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, this has been an incredible conversation. I mean, second time around, and I still haven't even gotten to the bottom of, all the things that you can bring to the table. Maybe we should make this a yearly occurrence. We did one last year, this year, and then maybe next year I'll get my people to get in touch with you and we can actually make a series out of this.
It's a deal, Prosper. It's a deal. You're a very persuasive guy. Yeah, no, we'll consider that a verbal contract, and I'll make sure there is the Michael Dodd appearance on the Online Prosperity Show in 2027 and 2028 and 2029. So that'll be a joy.
Absolutely. You mentioned bribes earlier on, so I'm hoping there's not going to be any
Well, I have to confess, I have received a bribe. I got this amazing book in the post, Your Own Media. And every letter of media, from what I've read so far, actually is an acronym for something else as well. So if you meet Prosper in the streets of Melbourne, ask him about that. But yeah, I've been bribed. I've been given a book. And I'm told by psychologists, as you know, that if you stroke the book while you're talking about it, it makes it even more desirable. So thank you for the book, and I look forward to meeting you in person in Melbourne, maybe at a really nice Melbourne pub. I know they have them.
Absolutely, Michael. I can't wait for that. And thank you so much. Because what I love most about your journey is that it actually shows us something really powerful. You know, sometimes the hardest experience in our past or whatever it is that we've been through literally becomes the tools that we can use to help others. And that's exactly what you have done. So thank you so much for connecting the dots for that and for actually helping people, especially at a time like this. And for anybody who's watching or listening right now, thank you all so much for also coming to this part of the show. And if today's episode helped you see communication differently, I encourage you to share this with somebody who could benefit from learning how to answer tough questions with confidence, because each and every one of us is going to be put to scrutiny at some point if we're going to be creating businesses that are profitable and enjoyable. And if this is your first time on the Online Prosperity Show, be sure to tune in to the next episode where we're going to be talking about ideas that can help you create a happier, more fulfilled existence. So make sure you don't miss it, and subscribe, follow, and stay connected. Until next time, bye for now.